Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Bill Sigline from the CISO Executive Network. Welcome to our second quarterly webinar. This one today is on employee awareness, finding ways to use your staff to help lower risk. As a former CISO, I spent time thinking about training and awareness programs, and I recall back to the days when I was working at a very large consultancy, and we were information security consultants, and we were teaching our own firm how to better educate its own employees, and we would have employee awareness days. We would have posters and flyers and opportunities to learn how to use shredders, and it became a very effective tool in getting folks to understand that every single employee has a role to play in protecting information. Today's webinar is featuring Matt Tolbert, the Information Security Manager globally for Westinghouse Electric. Matt is also a member of the Pittsburgh chapter, one of the founding members there, and also sits on our advisory council. And joining him as well is our sponsor today from Safe Flight Security, Rob Sheen. Rob is the founder and CEO, and Rob is an expert in adult education. If you were at the RSA Security Conference, you may have seen Rob doing a very interesting demonstration about how to teach adults to do things like the Rubik's Cube, and very, very interesting. So we're very pleased that you've joined us today. Let's move to the next slide here. To the next slide. Who we are. So I want you guys to understand, if there's folks out there who are not members of the organization, we are a peer-to-peer network for executive-level information security professionals. We're currently about 1,100 members strong across 10 chapter cities in the U.S., plus a virtual chapter that includes members who are in cities where we don't physically have a chapter that meets for local meetings. We also have members from across the globe who have now begun to join. We're very excited about that. This year we will host a total of 60 breakfast roundtables, and on April 19th we'll have our annual leadership summit. And another important thing is we have a LinkedIn discussion group, and if you're not a member of that, I encourage you to consider joining our LinkedIn discussion group. Here's our webinar schedule for the year. Many of you attended the January 10th regulatory update that was presented by Reed Smith. We did post that on the website. We got a lot of folks who downloaded that and found that very valuable. Of course, also today, our employee awareness. But for your calendars in the future, consider that we have one coming up on July 17th. This will be our annual threat briefing. We'll get an update on some of the latest threats, including advanced persistent threats. That's sponsored by Agilance. And then on November 6th, we will complete the year with a webinar on incident response, rehearsing for the inevitable, and knowing that many of us are already probably had by some sort of a bot or some foreign adversary, kind of a scary thought. What do you do when that does happen? That's also sponsored by Agilance. So put those in your calendar. A couple of administrative details about today's webinar. We are recording it, and it will be posted on our website, cisoexecnet.com, and you'll be provided with the links for that. During the webinar, I mentioned to most of you earlier, we have the ability, or you have the ability, to post questions, and I'll be able to see those. We'll do our very best to make sure that we get those to our speakers. I will read those on your behalf. I'll keep all of our attendees on mute. As you can imagine, with 60-some people online, it's difficult to have everybody speaking. So we'll give those questions to our speaker selectively, and the ones that we don't get to, we will have those written answers on the website posted sometime in the next 48 hours or so. And you will receive a follow-up email that you'll need to claim your CPE for today. You should get 1 hour of CPE for today's event. So let's talk real briefly about today's topic before I introduce Rob Sheen. As I mentioned earlier, as a former CISO, I always found that making employees aware was a very cost-effective way of lowering risk. And yet, unfortunately, I think that many organizations don't put significant effort into this, and very often it's the first place that we cut budget if we've budgeted any money for employee awareness or training. But the truth is, it is one of the most cost-effective ways to lower risk overall. And this is right off of Safe Flight's website. I talked to Rob about this briefly the other day. Leading organizations are really looking at the people side of this equation, and they're building security education programs that sense that an employee is a very valuable asset for lowering risk. If an employee understands what they're handling on a day-to-day basis, the applications that they use, the data that they're using, the data that they're pushing out to clients and pulling in from clients, it's a significant impact. And what these leading organizations are doing is creating what Rob calls a culture of security. And it truly is making a difference. And we're going to hear that today from Matt Tolbert when he talks about some of what he's doing over at Westinghouse. So I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to hand the reins over to Rob. And Rob will, let's see, Rob, I'm going to give you the keyboard and mouse, and I'm going to unmute you. And so, Rob, good morning. How are you today?
Great, thanks, Bill. So let me just make sure that the slides advance here. That's a good start. Perfect. All right. So, Bill, to your point, this is definitely something that I've seen that a lot of organizations either don't do or it is the first thing they cut, unfortunately. And it's kind of sad to me because it is one of the more cost-effective things you can do. I've been tracking closely the whole security thing since about '98, and I've observed that we've gotten better as a group at doing security. We now have a good idea of what that means, but unfortunately we don't always do it. So, and even when we do, the attackers tend to be pretty far ahead of us because, I usually attribute it to Moore's law. Every 18 months you have twice as much disk space, twice as much memory, twice as much CPU, and that enables all kinds of really interesting technology advances that your attackers are very, very aware of, and they tend to follow very closely. But most organizations don't deploy at the rate of Moore's law. So what ends up happening is there's always this pretty significant gap between what's currently available and where we are in our own enterprise. And what I've observed, if I actually should have had a graph in here, but I've observed over 14 years of looking at this that the gap is growing, and if we don't really address this stuff now, it's just going to get worse. So that's where we really need a sense of urgency. We've made a lot of progress, and what we really need to do is close this gap by educating the people that work with us. And I usually start when I teach full-length classes. I'll tell people, look, you have in your average 10,000 person company, you might have 50 security people at most, and that'd be like a well-stocked security group. Generally, it's even fewer than that. I've seen groups where there's 10 or 5. And even if there were 100, it doesn't matter because you really can't have the security group doing everything. The security group is there to, lay down policies and put out technologies that help and to architect solutions, but they can't babysit everybody. So what we really have seen is the companies that really get this right, they assume it's everybody's job and they roll out their programs accordingly. Just trying to get my, did I lose my mouse pointer here? There we go. So it's really time to take our game to the next level here. So on your screen here in a second, you should see a quote from Albert Einstein that says, "The significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them." And I really love that quote for lots of reasons. It really applies here because what I've seen is that we tend to want to solve our security issues with technology. We really want to deploy all the latest whiz-bang gadgets and shiny boxes and brand new software, and that's all well and good, but ultimately the data speaks for itself. People are still getting in. There are still incidents that occur, and the number of incidents has been growing significantly over a number of years. It's trailed off a little bit in the last year or so, but the severity of incidents has been growing significantly. So I think if we try to solve our problems with technology, we're kind of kidding ourselves because, take any particular technology and try to prove to me that a hacker can't find a way around it. It's just, I've not seen something yet that can't be broken. As far as I'm concerned, all software is broken. It should be assumed so. It's just a better assumption. In fact, in our classes, we should write on the whiteboard, right? The first thing in the morning, assume it will fail, and I leave that up there all day, and I keep referring back to it, because if you assume things will fail, you'll make better distinctions and better assumptions. So really the new thinking is that you really have to take a different look at it and try to cultivate a culture of security within your organization. And this has to be done explicitly. It doesn't usually happen by accident. And what I've done in the rest of this presentation is I've laid out the things that I've noticed over the years of being a security practitioner, the things I've noticed that people miss the most often, but more specifically, for the organizations that get it right, these are the things that are always there. So these elements, not only are the ones that people most often miss, but the ones that get it right, they all do these things. So let's just dive right in here. Organizations that get it right, first of all, they teach. And they're really trying to truly instill a proper security mindset in their employees, not just in the security group, not just in the developers, but everybody needs to understand what their role is for security. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The next one is that the organizations that pull this off well, they always have good organizational leadership. And there's always somebody that's, rah-rah, go security. And, the ones that don't get it typically miss that. Another one is we want to make sure we harness our talent, and really what that means is enrolling security deputies from every area of your organization. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. And then the last one is communicate. So you could have everything else right, and you could have perfect security knowledge, but unless you're actually communicating it effectively, it just falls on deaf ears and people resist it. So a large part of doing security well is overcoming that organizational resistance to change, the organizational resistance to doing anything that's perceived to be, challenging or hard, and, really getting that message out. It's almost as good security should be as much marketing as it is security, because if people don't get your message, it doesn't matter how good it is. So let's dive right into the first one, security mindset. So I've left the word everyone here on the screen for a reason, and because everyone must be taught, and there's really no way around this. I've seen lots of differing opinions on this over the years, but the groups that I think that really get it right, they do train everybody. And I also believe, having been an instructor for quite some time, and I've trained tens of thousands of people, everyone can be taught. And I find when people say that certain groups of people can't be taught, it's usually because they don't know how to reach those people. They don't know how to teach them. But everybody can be taught, and they have to be. And here's another little trick. This is something I've picked up along the way. The whole policy thing where you say thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, and you can communicate that till you're blue in the face, but a little bit of why goes a long way. If you explain to people why they have to do something, and it can be as simple as, I see a lot of times people complain about things like having to memorize long complex passwords. Show them a password cracker and show them how easy it is to crack a password, and suddenly they'll really want to do it. I've had people that have been complaining about it for months, and then you show them the password cracker, and then suddenly all the complaints go away. And the same thing applies to things like SQL injection and cross-site scripting. And the trick is, obviously, you have to convey the information that's appropriate for the audience, though. So it's easy to lose non-technical people with a technical demo, but I can promise you it is absolutely possible to do reasonable technical demos for non-technical people in order to get them to understand the why. And it really makes a huge difference and drops a lot of the resistances that do come up. So this is straight out of a white paper I just wrote on instilling a security mindset, and you can get it from our website later if you want to. But it walks you through a process of how you can instill a security mindset into a particular person. And it doesn't really matter what role they have in the organization. Doing some semblance of this for any person that needs to have the security mindset works. And we have many, 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 many iterations of proving that this works. But the first step is obviously convincing people it's important, really teaching them what they're up against, and understanding that the way that a hacker approaches a problem is very, very different than the way typical people approach problems. And I like to use examples of real-world things like locks, because everybody has a lock, everybody understands locks, and you explain to them things like, you know how lockpicks work, and a lot of the things that attackers do in the real world are the digital equivalent of that in the virtual world. So setting that context really helps. And then I found over the years that there are as many security ideas as there are people, it seems sometimes. So it's very, very important, if you don't want people to resist things for the wrong reasons, to break down the obvious security misconceptions like, firewalls solve all your problems and SSL solves all your problems, and, internal security is somehow safer than external security. If you really break down those misconceptions, then those are usually the reasons why people resist things, because they usually have a false sense of security and think that something's protecting them that's really not. So that's absolutely critical, and almost everybody misses that step. As I mentioned before, demonstrating some kind of real-world attack scenarios, that's going to vary a lot depending on the group you're teaching. It can be something very simple like demonstrating basic social engineering for non-technical people, all the way down to really low-level examples for developers of SQL injection, cross-site scripting, buffer overflows, things like that. And then you definitely want to teach everybody at least some security fundamentals. Again, that varies according to the group. So a developer is going to need to learn about OWASP Top 10 and dive down into how to actually correct those issues. Whereas the average non-technical person probably doesn't need to go quite that deep. They just need basic security awareness, how to use their computers safely, that kind of stuff. So it does vary according to the group. The important thing, and this is one of the ones that people miss frequently, is that you want to provide actionable items. A lot of people stop at step 5. And then people are like, all right, this is all cool. I learned a bunch of information that's fun and interesting, but I don't know how to actually apply it to my day job. So you have to bridge that gap for people. You can't assume that people are going to make that leap. So for any given audience that you're teaching, you want to try to figure out, what are the takeaways that I want them to explicitly to do differently. In fact, this is just a good trick for anytime you're doing a presentation. Always ask yourself, what do you want them to think, do, or feel differently at the end of your presentation? And I learned that trick from some really, really high-end public speakers, so I trust that one. So let's jump into the next one. So security leadership is something that I have noticed that, again, every organization that does this well always has somebody that's encouraging people to do security and encouraging the organization to do security. If you don't have that constant organization, security can be hard. So people tend to just let it go over time, or they maybe prioritize it incorrectly. I generally would point out that there's this interesting balance between business requirements and security requirements, and ideally they should be fairly equally weighted things, because if you have zero security, obviously your application or system is going to get hacked into and you're going to lose all your data, and that's obviously really bad. So there should be this balance, but oftentimes the business requirements get significantly more weight than the security requirements. So having the security cheerleader helps a lot there. The other thing to keep in mind is it doesn't always have to be the person that's directly in charge of the security program to be a security leader. I try to encourage people whenever I teach a class. I usually at the end I kind of half-jokingly anoint them all security leaders and say, go back into your organization and teach this stuff, because the more people out there that are ringing the bell for security, the more likely it is that we're going to notice the things that are going to get us into trouble. And good leaders teach. So there's, on the one hand, you can have the leadership style where, you're just trying to do everything yourself and be the hero, but it doesn't scale well. So you really want to encourage your leaders to teach as many other people the knowledge they have as possible. And I usually tell people when I teach my sessions, please, anything that you find in any of these presentations, please steal it, do whatever, reuse it, do whatever you can to get the knowledge out there, because otherwise, that's the easiest way to make a difference, is to actually propagate the knowledge. And then the next one that I find is interesting, that I've seen this done a variety of ways, is to find people who are interested in security and want to help. And there's no official deputization process here, but it's just kind of a cheeky way of saying enroll them in helping you out. So it can be a formal thing or it can be an informal thing. It depends on the organization for what makes sense. But I've seen everything from large financial service organizations that literally officially anoint security deputies or local security coordinators whose job it is, if there is new security information that needs to be propagated out, they'll help distribute it out to you. You distribute it out to your nodes or your deputies, and they distribute it out to their groups. And this can also be just as helpful if you have some kind of a security incident. It allows you to get the information out in actionable ways very, very quickly. And that can make the difference between dealing with the incident appropriately or not. So that can make a huge difference as well. And ultimately, having those deputies out there really helps to instill that security mindset, because those are the people that are going to be your local cheerleaders in the various groups that might notice that someone's doing something, making a decision that may not be the best from a security point of view, and they can at least point out, hey, we should talk about this. Now, sometimes people ask, well, where do you get these deputies? How do you recruit them? Well, that's easy. Host a brown bag lunch on a really interesting security topic and have an expert come in, and then the people that show up, that's your first round of deputies right there. That's a good starting point, because they're the ones that show up are the ones that are going to be actually excited about it, because you don't want to appoint this role to a person that doesn't care, because they'll just prioritize it down to the bottom if they don't find it interesting. So you want to find people that are passionate about it, and they're the ones that are really going to be carrying the banner for you. And then the last thing I want to mention here is communications, because I have noticed over the years, forget about security, I have just noticed this interesting communications gap between technology people and non-technology people. And it's usually pretty challenging to surmount unless you're explicitly trying to adjust. So you kind of need this, like the Star Trek universal translator. And it's complicated by security because technology has its own vocabulary, but security has its own as well. So I find that there's multiple gaps here. So it's not just the gap between technology and non-technology. There's technology between security and technology. There's another gap between the security group and the business people, the non-technology side, and then also the security group and the entire organization. So again, like I mentioned earlier, a good security program really has to have elements of a good marketing program in it. And if it doesn't, oftentimes you find people scratching their heads just not understanding, why doesn't this work? We have all this great information, we have all this great knowledge, we even have these great training programs, but it's kind of falling on deaf ears. And that's usually the focus where you have to really look at it organizationally and even enroll some of your marketing communications groups, internally as if you would for anything else that you're trying to communicate. So that's a really important element. And there's a slide here for questions, but I think at this point we'll leave questions to the end, and I'll hand it over to Matt to continue on with his talk.
Yeah, before we go to Matt, real quick, Rob, I do have a question for you, though. And one of the things that I discovered throughout the years is when I would bring in an information security program, and some of the other members of our group have had this experience, they've had to involve their internal education program. There's usually, in larger corporations, there's usually a division that handles employee education for things like compliance and so forth, and they get involved. Sometimes it bogs down. Have you experienced that, and how have you overcome that challenge?
That's a really good question. So I have seen that. Actually, there's usually the larger organization, the more likely they are to have some kind of an internal employee education group. And ideally, you try to work within their context, but I've also seen cases where if someone's trying, like let's say there's been an incident and we're trying to get training out right away, I've seen examples where the education group is temporarily bypassed in order to roll out something via the security group, and then later they try to roll it back into the overall education process. Because if you already have an employee education process in place, with it, maybe with a learning management system that tracks employees and scores, it's usually a good thing to try to work within that framework, because there's lots of other classes that are being rolled out. And the more you can work within that, usually the better it is. But I have absolutely seen multiple cases where, it takes months to get something set up in the system for whatever reason, and they need something sooner than that. So they'll just, get a pass on that and try to, do it directly.
Yeah, I've seen that. Matt, I know that when I unmute you and bring you on, you'll be able to address some of this as well. The other question I have is, today, in most organizations, there's a tremendous issue with cross-border. Most companies are multinational, and so I think that we've got to remember things like training has to be done in multiple languages, and there are some cultural things to overcome. Have you bumped into any of that as you guys are setting up security awareness programs for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And that varies tremendously depending on the organization. So, we've been shipped around the world to do trainings. We've trained in China. We've trained in India. I find usually with the U.S.-based companies, the types of people they tend to recruit in, say, China or India tend to be well educated and speak clear English, so there's not as much localization issues there. But I've noticed in the larger scale, when we roll out large-scale e-learning products, sometimes we get asked to do localization, and that actually don't underestimate the complexity of that. There's lots of steps involved there to do that properly. So definitely want to build in lots of lead times into your projects if you have that kind of situation.
Okay, my final question is kind of the combination of technology-based training and human touch training. And I know you touched on it briefly, but I mean, I think it's just important to note that you can't expect all of this to be done just by clicking some answers. There's also got to be some human touch involved in this, and getting out and about as a security person to educate the troops and get them engaged. And I think you addressed that, but would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have noticed that one approach that can be really effective is if you're trying to, a lot of times when people roll out e-learning, it's for cost reasons. Instructor-led training is obviously ideal because you're in the room, you can address their questions, and really you can make a very profound impact when you show up and show them what they really need to be done, what they really need to do. So we've seen sometimes just at least get the senior people through something like that, where you can get them to really be enrolled in the idea that security is important. But it can't just be a really deep technical presentation, because that tends to, people make the mistake with technical presentations that it needs to be all about data, lots and lots of content. As far as the human touch side, I've noticed that if you cram someone's head full of information, they're going to forget it within a week. So really what you want to do is figure out what are the key 2 or 3 messages for a particular session or course that must be instilled, and then focus on those things and then weave everything else around that, versus just trying to dump all this data into their brains and hope it's going to stick, because it just won't.
Yeah, very good points, Rob. Thank you so much, and thank you to SafeLight for being the underwriter and sponsor of today's event. Rob, I'll have you come back on at the end after we hear from Matt, and we may have some additional questions for you at that time. Matt, I've unmuted you, and I look forward to having you present. You've got the keyboard and mouse now, so you can move to the next slide deck. Matt will really take this to the next level. Now we've heard sort of the best practices from the folks at SafeLight. Matt's going to tell you how he engaged SafeLight and how he has implemented a program practically at Westinghouse Electric. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here. And once again, Rob, thanks so much for your presentation, too. I really liked the one slide that you had where you emphasized the importance of when you provide security training for your employees or contractors or whoever, it's important to communicate the need to know why and not just the what. In the many years I've been doing security awareness presentations, training, awareness programs, the kind of 3 steps I've always used is start with talking about the risks first. What do you need to be aware of? And then jump into stories, if possible do demonstrations of what the risk is to help it kind of sink in. And then talk about what you expect folks to do with regards to security practices, behaviors, policy compliance, and those types of things. One of the things I love doing, I've had a lot of success with this over the years, is when I do the demonstration, there's a great video on YouTube. I think many of you have heard about Project Aurora. That was when the Department of Energy showed what happens if a virus or a hacker can get onto a control system for a diesel generator. And within an appropriate amount of time, it's only like a minute or two, the video shows the generator literally tearing itself apart to the point that not only the generator but the building housing the generator catches on fire. And I think it's just a great way to show the potential risk that a compromised system could have to one's operations. Well, everyone, my name is Matt Tolbert, and I serve Westinghouse Electric Company as its Global Manager of Information Security. And what I'm hoping to do over the next 20 to 30 minutes is really just talk about how my security team offers security training and awareness here at Westinghouse. Also, I'll talk a little bit about, essentially I'll tell the story about how we developed our security awareness and training program over the past 2 years at Westinghouse. My hope for everyone is that it's going to give you some ideas and new insights in terms of how you can either implement or improve your security awareness training practices and program. So let's jump right in. Let me talk a little bit, first of all, about Westinghouse, just to give you some context. Westinghouse, it's a $5 billion a year Fortune 500 company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have over 15,000 personnel, both employees and contract labor personnel, located in 86 different locations in 23 countries around the world. So not just the United States, but we have a very large presence in Europe, places like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and especially large group, over 2,000 personnel in Sweden. We also have personnel in the Far East, places like Shanghai, Beijing, places like Sanmen and Haiyang, where we're building nuclear power plants for the Chinese, and other locations as well, growing in areas including South America now, countries like Brazil. And as a company, Westinghouse, of course, we help build nuclear power plants. We service nuclear power plants. We have engineering talent and expertise in terms of all things nuclear. So one of the things I'm fortunate to have when I arrived here at Westinghouse nearly 3 years ago is that Westinghouse definitely has a culture of safety. And what we've been able to achieve over the past few years is to expand that to not just safety, but also computer security as well. And we've done that, by the way, without not necessarily too much of a significant investment. The reason why I have this slide up here that you see is security training plus security awareness equals cost-effective risk reduction, is that, and as we've been pointing out earlier, I think an investment in security training and awareness, which doesn't have to be significant, can provide, I think, significant risk reduction, whether it's preventing people from getting viruses, not opening email links, for example, or attachments, can certainly reduce the amount of cost and effort to remediate any kind of virus event issue, those types of things. By the way, here at Westinghouse, my budget for security awareness and training, it ranges per year from about only $100,000 to $200,000. But the risk reduction in terms of some of the enterprise risk management planning that we've done can be significant. We think that the cost savings can potentially be over $1 billion a year from avoiding the consequences of a cybersecurity-related risk happening. Also of interest, too, my core security team here at Westinghouse, I have 10 personnel, 10 professionals. I have no full-time person doing security awareness. But I do have essentially the expectation for my team that everyone on my team will be responsible for security awareness and training as part of their overall responsibilities. So that could be doing presentations, responding to email questions that we receive at our information security Westinghouse email account, to just every time we're dealing with an incident or resolving an issue, taking that as a teaching moment for our personnel in terms of what they can do better, how they can improve computer security at Westinghouse. Now, here at Westinghouse, we actually have two separate programs. We have a security training program, and then we have a separate security awareness program. And the reason why we differentiate between the two is because the goals are different for these two programs. For security training, in a nutshell, our training program is for folks either joining Westinghouse for the first time. That could be new hires, that could be contractors. We want to make sure we have the opportunity to teach them in terms of what they need to know and what they should or should not be doing. Training typically happens for our new hires and new contractors within the first week. In fact, for all of our new hires, for example, that come to our Pittsburgh headquarters, literally on the first day they'll receive a half-hour introductory security training program as part of their orientation. Security awareness, on the other hand, is a program that really is intended to remind our personnel in terms of what they need to know and what they need to do when it comes to computer security and dealing with cyber risks. And I'll let you go through the bullet points here in terms of some of the reasons why we do this and the benefits associated with that. So Westinghouse for years has been providing security training to its personnel, but when I came aboard, I really wanted to make sure we had a much more comprehensive program. And this was in alignment with a new initiative that Westinghouse has started 3 years ago called Project Synergy. The idea was to ensure that we had a center-led organization for all processes and services throughout our global operations. We wanted to make sure that the training that you received here in Pittsburgh was the same type of training you received in, say, Columbia, South Carolina, or Vasteras, Sweden, or Shanghai, China. So what we did was we put together essentially a security training awareness strategy. And the diagram that you're looking at here depicts what that strategy is. It really starts with developing a fundamental program for training and awareness capabilities. So that's everything from identifying and understanding our target audience, developing security training awareness branding, so our personnel know that the training is coming from our security group and it's official, both policy and insights and requirements coming from Westinghouse Corporate. Communications, in terms of working closely with our communications group so that any kind of awareness communications, for example, would be official communications. And of course addressing regulatory compliance with regards to security awareness and training and other aspects of the program. With that kind of foundation, then we were able to use it to develop our computer security training program, of which there's really 4 different aspects to that program. First is our new hire orientation. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, any new hire coming to Westinghouse will have a half-hour training program to introduce them to basic concepts on computer security. They are then required to take an hour-plus long introduction to computer security training class or online training program, which provides additional information and details about risks applicable to the nuclear industry and expectations on the tools and methods and policy compliance steps that they need to take to help protect Westinghouse computer systems and data. We also offer advanced computer security training. This is primarily targeted for our information systems and IT personnel. This is advanced training in things such as secure programming, performing security reviews and audits. This is, once again, training that's really targeted primarily towards IT professionals or engineers who are dealing with any kind of, say, computer-based or computer-controlled technology. And finally, security certifications. I'm very strong with regards to ensuring that people within our IS information have the opportunity to credentialize themselves. Now, whether that's getting a CISSP certification or a much more technical certification like the GSEC certifications, essentially we have a program that supports our personnel to be able to work to achieve those kind of certifications. And then finally, as I mentioned a few months ago, computer security training is a starting point to make people aware of what they need to do and what they need to know about. Computer security awareness is in terms of the reminders of people about their responsibilities or to make them aware of, for example, new risks as well as new capabilities and new services. So we have a variety of different things. I'll be actually showing you in the next few slides, I think, aspects of our computer security awareness program. Branding. I want to briefly mention something that I learned a few years ago that's worked very well here at Westinghouse, and that's the benefits of branding. To make sure that any kind of training or awareness material that you put out has some sort of logo or label so people know that what they're looking at, what they're reading, is official Westinghouse program, official Westinghouse information. So what we did here at Westinghouse was we developed, and that's the logo you see in the upper left-hand corner, this Operation Computer Security logo. We put this on everything that we create, and it's worked very well because it not only helps people understand this is official Westinghouse information, official Westinghouse requirements for, say, security policy compliance, but it's also really helped demonstrate the investment that information systems, the group I belong to, has made into making all of our personnel aware of computer security risks and their responsibilities to address those risks. So one thing that I encourage everyone to consider is that if you're rolling out a new program, if you have a program, have some fun and come up with a logo that you can use to brand all the materials and information that you're providing to your organization. Now, when we developed the strategy, we wanted to make sure that we were encountering, or actually encompassing, all of the intended targeted audiences. And when we went through the exercise of identifying, well, who needs security training and awareness, we identified it's more than just contractors and employees. It's also other folks as well. So, for example, in the lower right-hand corner, we identified that, there's partners, companies we work with, professional engineers, for example, from other organizations that work closely with our personnel. It's important that they're made aware, too, of their responsibilities, of the risks that, because as partners, they may have access to, say, parts of our network environment or to Westinghouse computer systems. So it's critical for them to understand what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Same with visitors. So a lot of times we'll have visitors. For example, we'll have vendors who want to come in and do a demonstration of a new engineering tool or a new computer software package. So it's critical for our visitors, too, to understand what they're allowed to do and, frankly, what they're not allowed to do. So now let me show you some examples of Westinghouse's Computer Security Awareness Program. The first thing I want to show you, and this is really the heart of our Computer Security Awareness Program. This is our main portal page. We have a web portal, internal web portal. We fondly call it George, named after our founder, George Westinghouse. And on our portal site, we have a dedicated Computer Security at Westinghouse page, which provides essentially a centralized one-stop shopping location for any kind of information you need about security awareness or about any of the security services that my team provides to Westinghouse. It includes a link, you can see in this box in the upper left-hand side on computer security awareness. If I were to click on that, it'll actually take you to a portal page here that shows the variety of different awareness materials and information that you can find. Everything from some basic information, for example, computer security awareness for Westinghouse visitors, to specific guidance based on topics of interest, like how to choose a strong passphrase, how to secure your home wireless network. We've had a lot of interest, I think, in people getting guidance on that. And even some advanced information, too. Under the section Industrial Control Systems, for example, I would say industrial control systems like SCADA devices and programmable logical control units are of particular interest to Westinghouse from a security and risk management standpoint. So we have everything from links to guidance provided by, say, Department of Homeland Security, links to recommendations and regulations, and even links to certain YouTube sites. By the way, here at Westinghouse, we do block most access to YouTube, but we do allow access to certain YouTube sites, including those that are of interest, such as we have a great video out there that talks about the Stuxnet worm that infected the Iranian Bushehr nuclear power plant facility and the Nanchez nuclear fuels processing facility back in around 2008. So you can literally just click on this link and see a rather entertaining but very informative video with regards to Stuxnet the worm, why it was a risk, the impact it had on Iran's nuclear power program, and the lessons learned from that incident. Some additional security awareness materials. These are just samples of some of the brochures that we've created that we make available to our targeted audiences. So, for example, we have a lot of our engineers who travel all over the world. So we have a brochure that walks them through some basic pointers in terms of how to protect their laptop, how to securely get access to their Westinghouse email. Brochure in the center is a brochure that you'll find a copy of this out in the lobby of every major Westinghouse facility. When you walk in, if you're curious as to, well, am I allowed to use a USB memory stick or not at Westinghouse? Am I allowed to bring my laptop or tablet PC into a Westinghouse facility? All those answers are answered here in this brochure. And we even have one for our field service engineers. This is specific guidance, and this was actually a consequence of our review of how the Stuxnet worm infected the nuclear control systems at the Bushehr nuclear power plant. We provide tips and guidance in terms of things that our field service engineers should or should not be doing when they're actually working in a customer nuclear power plant. These are some examples of some of the security awareness posters that we put out on a regular basis throughout all of our 86 Westinghouse facilities. And these were created in a cooperative effort with our graphic arts department. And I got to tell you, we frankly had a lot of fun doing this. In terms of, I think, things that my team learned a lot working with the graphic arts group. In terms of, for example, what really makes an effective poster? What do you want to do or not do to basically get people's attention and to impart a critical message? So I really like about these posters, and you can see the examples. First of all, branding. We have our Operation Computer Security logo in the upper right-hand corner, so you know it's official Westinghouse. And then our graphic arts group came up with this really great logo to demonstrate a virus, which we use consistently across all of our different posters. So it's kind of like branding again, a consistent image to let you know what it's all about. And then with the poster itself, just a very simple, straightforward message. Not a lot of content, just a quick, here's what you need to know, here's what you need to do. By the way, down here in the bottom of the poster, and this has worked very well for us, if people want to find out more information about computer security at Westinghouse, and say they don't know the link to our portal site, all they have to do is do a Google search using our internal Google search engine on computer security, and that link automatically takes you back to our computer security at Westinghouse page. Here's just some other examples, too, of posters that we've put out as well. And these work, once again, very well, very professional looking, eye-catching, and quickly imparts the message in terms of what the risk is and what people are expected to do. This final slide here for security awareness, this is actually encompassing two things. First of all, what you're looking at is the image that shows up on one of Westinghouse's many digital screens. In lieu of many times putting up posters, scattered throughout our buildings, you'll see these giant LCD TVs that are constantly flashing messages, kind of like the new digital boards that you see when you're driving down the highway. So first of all, this shows one of the messages that we typically flash up on the screens on a regular basis. Second, this was actually the screen that we used to advertise Westinghouse's yearly Computer Security Awareness Week. And I got to tell you, this program that my team put together, I give them a lot of credit for their creativity and effort in doing this. I think in part because they had a lot of fun. We had a whole week of presentations, putting up new posters, communications by emails. And one of the things that my team really enjoyed was in our main cafeterias, we set up lunchtime demonstrations as to how hackers can hack into different computer systems. So it gave my team a chance to kind of show their skills. But it also helped us show our personnel in terms of that a lot of these risks they hear about in the news, they see on TV, are real. And especially since a lot of our personnel are very technical, a lot of them are engineers, I think they appreciate the fact that they can see how certain security risk exploits are performed. Okay, let's move on to a computer security training program and how we do our training here at Westinghouse. The steps we went through to create the training program were the following. The first thing we did was we really looked at our target audiences, and we primarily came up with 5, just all Westinghouse personnel, leadership, training specifically for example, anyone who's director, vice president, or higher level. For our development staff, anyone who's doing any kind of computer software development work, our overall IS operations staff, and finally my team, the security staff. And as you can see here, there were different things that we knew we wanted to make sure that we covered, certain key topics that were appropriate for these audiences. So what we do is that information we developed was called the training matrix, and what we wanted to do was make sure that based on those topics, either we had training or we would develop new training to address those target audience needs. And this chart here, one of the things you'll see is that when we did the initial training matrix analysis, we quickly found out that we were missing training on database security as well as Windows Server security training. So that's one of the benefits in terms of the training matrix. You quickly see what you have and what you need to develop. Now, for our computer training, any kind of computer-based training, I was lucky because here at Westinghouse we invested in an online training program called Atlas. This is essentially SAP's online computer training service that we implemented as part of our major upgrade to SAP ECC this past year. The great thing about the Atlas system, actually there's a variety if I go to the next slide here, is that, first of all, we have one place where all of our personnel can go to get access to training material. And what's also nice, too, is that I can click on a link within our Westinghouse web portal, and it'll take us right to a specific training class that's hosted by the Atlas system. What's great about Atlas too is that when you sign up for a class, you have to sign up to take any of the training. You register that you started the class. Atlas will then actually check to confirm that you're taking the class or complete it within a certain time frame, and it will even confirm that you completed the entire training course. You can even, for example, do completion quizzes, and it'll record the results of the quizzes to test comprehension, knowledge, and understanding of the training that you had. What's also great, too, about Atlas is that if I do need to restrict certain training materials, Atlas can do that based on person's work responsibilities, citizenship, or any other kind of criteria. What's nice is that Atlas ties directly within our SAP HR system. So based on personnel information we have there, we can determine whether a person is approved to be able to take certain type of training. Of course, the nice thing, too, is that with Atlas, if you want to stop at some point, so you have to go to a meeting, you can close out the training, and then when you go back into Atlas, you can pick up right from where you left off, no problem. And finally, what I think a lot of our personnel really appreciate is when you complete the training, it'll actually create a training completion certificate for you that you can keep for your personal records, show to your supervisor, those types of things. Now, probably the most important training class we have is our hour-plus-long Introduction to Computer Security training class. And what we had in the past was essentially and I'll say it straight, it was boring, a boring PowerPoint deck of just slides, a lot of bullet points and things like that. So what we really wanted to do is create something that was much more interactive, much more engaging, and also that would allow us to basically quickly convey information about new ongoing risks, new threats, as well as new recommendations and policy compliance for computer security. So essentially what happened was last year when I was attending the CISO Executive Summit in Baltimore, we had, of course, several different security vendors displaying their services and wares at that summit. And SafeLight was presenting there. So I had a chance to talk with them a little bit, see a quick demo of their computer-based training solution. And I asked them just a simple question, can you essentially take this training and customize it to meet our needs? They said yes, and as a result, you're seeing some of the final beta version slides of our Introduction to Computer Security training module based on SafeLight's technology. So here at the beginning, you see our Operation Computer Security branding. If I were to start the program, it'll walk through a couple of slides in terms of talking about, for example, the importance of computer security to the nuclear industry. A little bit more in terms of introductory information. And now, this is one of the things that I really liked about the SafeLight program. It's not just clicking through slides. You do get to interact with the program. So here, for example, is a place where I could choose one of 3 different storylines. So say I'm interested in the automotive industry. I can click on this and have a complete story talking about, in this particular case, industrial espionage. Now, that was the Introduction to Computer Security training. What we also did with SafeLight is we also acquired their advanced computer training modules. So, for example, on this slide here, you'll see a sampling of the secure Java coding training module. And as I click on it, it goes into this, once again, very interactive online training review of Java coding. Okay, well, my last slide here, and this is really, I just want to share with you my experiences in working with SafeLight. Keep in mind, the decision to go to SafeLight was based in part in terms of looking at all the different alternatives that were available to Westinghouse. We started with a presentation deck. Frankly, based on the old one, we weren't too enthralled with that. It just wasn't interactive. A lot of words, not enough engaging images, animation, those types of things. We did also look at video. In fact, my team was very strong pushing on that we should create a security training video. But I think our feedback that we got from our training professionals in our HR department was that videos work, but only to a certain point. They're still not as interactive as a good training experience should be. So finally, it was really down to creating a custom-built Introduction to Computer Security training program. And originally we thought we were going to create our own in-house, but when we looked at the effort and cost associated with that, that was rather significant. And then when we looked at Atlas and we saw that Yeah, essentially we like the fact that the course outline closely matched what we wanted to cover in an introduction to computer security training program. That all we require is probably minor customization, so that worked very well for us. We like the fact that it was interactive with animations, you have scenario selections, and you even have quizzes to test your knowledge. We like the fact that it was essentially a simple, very elegant interface. You're not having a lot of content thrown at you in each page. And finally, very important to us, we found out that, yeah, SafeLight was 100% compatible with our Atlas training system and all the benefits of using Atlas with this. Okay, well, I'm looking at the time, and hey, Bill, at this point, I'm going to turn it back to you. Everyone, just thanks so much for listening. Of course, if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Look forward to discussing your ideas and thoughts on security awareness and training.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I've been receiving emails and texts during this presentation. I know we've run just a few minutes late, so I'm simply going to jump through another slide. Real quick, thanks to Matt and thanks to Rob Sheen of SafeLight for sponsoring this event and covering this important topic. Once again, this webinar has been recorded. It will be posted on CISOExecNet.com in the next 48 hours. If you don't have an account, you'll need to grab one. Real quick, if you haven't already registered for the Leadership Summit, you still have time to do so. It's April 19th in Arlington. We have a fantastic group of speakers coming to that. Matt Tolbert will be there, as a matter of fact. Join us for our live chapter meetings in your city. Join me on LinkedIn, and stay tuned for newsletter updates. Thanks again, everybody, for such a fantastic day. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I know I did. And we will attempt to answer your questions in writing. So if you have not had a chance to ask those, just email them to me. Thanks again to Matt and to Rob. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you all sometime soon. Bye now.